extraordinary color drawings of European and of travels abroad. There's whole books on his colored sort of grease crayon drawings of things. And he was a beautiful renderer. His drawings are, there's a whole museum, his archives of his drawings at Penn, a whole Kahn archive there. No, he drew beautifully. And I was 25. And I think of being 25 as when I meet 25-year-olds, I think they're such babies. But I was 25, I was working for Lou. And he and I were quite friendly. And he was already the architect's architect, the architect of students of Yale, of Princeton, of MIT. The public knew nothing about him. He was unknown to the public, but other architects knew of him. And, but he was revered by students. Yale, they had a very good magazine at Yale School of Architecture called Perspecta, who did amazing stories on Lou's work, and that spread among the student community. And nobody had done a book. He wouldn't allow anybody to do a book on him, but there was articles on him, and there was something called the Philadelphia School, which came out of the people who adored him, faculty and students at Penn. And it had Venturi and Vreeland and Jurgala, different people who had gotten gold medals later on in their life from the AIA. So there were prominent teachers there, and then a number of students, and Moshe Zofty worked for him. And so I went to him at 25, and I said, Lou, I would like to do a book on you. And I hadn't worked there that long, couple of years. I mean, I was only 25, I just graduated. I had had him as a faculty member for my undergraduate and my master's degree. And we used to go to secretly, because we didn't want to tell people in the office because there were so many jealousies in the office. I didn't want to tell anybody, but he and I went to football games and baseball games together. And he said, okay. I said, I'd like to have a piece of you to have some of your best writings up to then. And he hadn't, the Salk building wasn't finished. He was working on it. And the labs at Penn, which was his breakthrough building, still was in the drawing stage or had just been finished. So he was just at the cusp of becoming a player, so to speak. Although he never did much work that got built in his life, and he didn't do anything before he was 50. And I said, I'd like to have some of your drawings, but no photos of your buildings or finished drawings of your buildings, or, the fancy drawings or the color drawings or the presentation drawings. I would just like to have a little sort of book of process and your drawings in Europe, and not the colored ones again either, just ones where you did them on yellow tracing paper or where I could see your process. He said, okay, let's pick out the drawings. I was shocked. I didn't expect that. And so I said, okay, I'll pick out the drawings. He said, what do you mean you'll pick out the drawings? You pick out my drawings? I said, yes. The idea is, it's my book to have a piece of you that's interesting to me. And he thought he couldn't, he was very scarred on his face, so his smile and laughter was very funny. He had had a childhood accident of before he was 1 or 2 years old, burning his face. And he thought it was really funny that I would have such hubris that I would pick out his drawings for a book on him. But he said, okay, I'll be interested to see what you pick out. So we went back and I opened the drawers and I picked out some drawings, more than I would need. He said, okay, do that. And I was friendly at that time with an amazing printer he had just a little print shop hung on by the, the nails on the end of his fingers financially, because he did a lot of experimental printing on a big press, one big press he had. Not one of these huge ones that you see now, but for that time it was early offset printing. And he did a lot of experimental printing and actually got a Guggenheim Award, the only one, for a printer doing press printing, not art printing, but because he was amazing, Gene Feldman. And he kept alive by doing some little books of some artists' work and of doing museum catalogs for the Philadelphia Museum of Art. And he and I were quite friendly. He'd never met Lou. And I said, he said he would print. I said, would you print this book? He said, yeah, this is an interesting project. I said, let's do it together. Because I didn't have any money. I was in school, or I was in his office. I didn't have anything. And Gene didn't have any money, but we thought we would do it. And Gene was the printer. So it was by myself and by Gene. And his printing of it was astounding. The things came off the page. It looked like you could see the charcoal. It was just beautifully done. And it was oversized and it had a linen cover and it was gold stamped with some trees I found that Lou had drawn that I pulled out of a drawing and got rid of the rest of the drawing. And, so it had these gnarly trees on the cover. And that came out in 1962, long time ago. Went out of print, printed a few thousand copies, went out of print, but it became a cult book, kind of. And it was Lou's favorite book. There's wonderful books on Lou, of his buildings and all, wonderful books, but this was his cult. And the last thing he bought before he went to India and then came home and died in New York at the train station, the famous shocking death, was 2 copies of that book. And just about a year ago, somebody I didn't know asked me, could they do a Kickstarter and bring out the book again in facsimile? Wow. In fact, the Kickstarter made it, 4,000 copies. And the companion volume, which I became the sort of executive editor of it, or consulting editor, the same size, but not with a hardcover and not a linen cover, which I named The Profound Scrapbook. And it's just the flotsam and jetsam, the ephemera of famous architects writing a little piece, some essays by 3 of his his 3 children, some interviews with some people, a few drawings people have never seen, an article by the person running the archives, Moshe Zafti writing a little story, and that'll be out in November. So Lou is still in my life, is what I'm saying.